Hi and welcome, Sarah here from Redrockingbird. Today I'd like to show you how I go about painting a floral bouquet. So first of all I sort of imagine I'd like all the foliage to sort of sit in this area, and then I'm going to have a vase that sits below. So this line here is the top of the vase, and then I'm going to fill my foliage above there. I know a lot of you like to see a photo of where my starting point is, so today I've chosen this little picture that somebody else has done, and so that's my kind of starting point really. Most of the time I tend to sort of, if I haven't got an actual bouquet of flowers or the still life in front of me, I quite often would have looked around at all the different things I want to paint and then in my mind conjure up what it might be. So I don't always start like this, but I know that a lot of you like to see the starting point and see the actual image that we're actually trying to create to begin with. And so I'm not trying to recreate that painting, I'm just using it as my still life, my kind of starting point really. So as you can see here, I'm just very roughly putting in the shapes so that I'm not too controlled. Can you see here that I'm holding the pencil quite high up? That just sort of gives you less control and a bit more freedom, and just let the pencil sort of wobble about and make those shapes and marks and just give you a rough guide of where you want your watercolour to go. I don't always start with a pencil like this, but for this one I just wanted to show you where I was trying to compose the picture and how I wanted to see it. I want a little bit more foliage down at the bottom, and I want a bigger, fuller bouquet of flowers, so I'm adding a bit more greenery at the bottom. I'm just using those two yellow flowers and then the red and the purple flowers in the background just to give a bit more detail and a bit more interest. So as you can see here, just loosely add everything in with a nice soft pencil here. And then the bouquet that we were looking at was just tied together and you saw the stems hanging down, but I think in this the composition's quite nice to have a big full top and then it not to be too thin at the bottom, so I like to add a vase there to add a bit of extra in the base, just carry a slight bit of weight into the base there. I don't do many floral bouquets and floral watercolours really, although of course I did when I was learning watercolour, maybe about, I think about 25 years ago now, when I first started to learn to watercolour, and since then I've been to art college and sort of you try and undo your learning a little bit to try and be a bit more expressive, so I suppose my style's really changed since within those 25 years. And so now we're just going to add some colour in. We've got a nice bright yellow here, and so I'm just going to very loosely just place a bit of dabbed colour in, and then I'm going to add a little green to the foliage. And to be honest, I haven't got too much method going on at the moment other than trying to get a bit of colour down on the page first. And we always want to leave some white spaces. Don't do a full flat wash. Make sure you're wobbling your brush around here like this, and it creates some white space because we do want to keep some white space as we paint. So I'm just adding a little into the background here. Do you see how it's quite nice to do nice big movements, not too controlled, and this is the way I just loosely paint. As I say, I don't always go in with the pencil first, but it just helps you understand where I'm going with the brush as I'm doing it. You can see we've got the different sections going on with two big flowers and then the smaller flowers and the different foliage in the background, just to make a nice composition and a really nice overall bouquet of flowers. Okay, we've got a nice red, a nice crimson here. There's some little buds, the flower buds there. Perhaps I should have put a wash underneath this section first, but I like to see how things go and just layer up a little and experiment as you go, really. So I'll add a bit more wash in the background. Don't worry if you think it's looking a bit of a mess at this stage, because it will all come together at the end. I'll have to do maybe a landscape with you as one of the next ones. That's what I've painted most as an artist, is landscapes. And likewise with this painting, it doesn't have to be something definite, and that's what I like about landscapes too, is that you can pick different parts of the landscape and put it together. It's nice to get a bit of wet on wet, but then after a while, if you let the whole painting dry and then start to layer up, I get a little bit impatient sometimes, and instead of letting it dry, I sort of dab it with a tissue and take off the extra wet and then dab that colour about a bit, just to add a bit more texture and a bit more spontaneity into the piece. So it's a little dry, it's still a little bit wet though, and I'm just going to go in and start painting again. So here we've got a nice violet, and I'm going to paint these nice flowers at the back. Just guide the brush and make some marks. They don't have to be perfect. It's all about letting the viewer, the eye of the viewer, just imagine what those little flowers and buds are. You don't have to be exact with them. That's my style anyway. I like it to be quite loose and free, and just allow a bit of the imagination to create what you're viewing here. Because obviously we can see it's flowers, and I think it hopefully will turn out really quite pretty. So here I've got a number 10 round brush, and it's nothing special. It's fairly basic, I think a nylon brush, this one, and I think as a beginner, yes, by all means get the most expensive, get the best you can, but also if you don't know if you're going to like watercolour, just try it out. And my piece of paper here is 190 gram paper. It's not the best by all means, but do you know, just get a pad of paper and see what happens. As I say, I like mine to be quite expressive, so I don't need it to be absolutely precise. If the paper wobbles a little, then once it's fully dry, we can flatten it out with a book on top for a while. I don't mind any of that, but obviously if you can get some watercolour paper and some watercolours, then that's great. As you know, I love to paint, but I also love everything crafty and everything creative. And so on my channel, on some of my other videos, I've been doing a lot of clay work and clay experimenting, so please do go and have a look at those as well if you like other forms of crafts and creativity, because they're really rather fun. I've done a little video where you can make your own clay, your own air dry clay in the microwave with PVA glue, which is a white craft glue, and cornstarch. So you can see here I've got some nice green, and I'm really just letting those grasses in the back just wisp out and just letting that painting really come to life a little bit more. So remembering again to leave the white space within parts of it, just to give that natural highlight within the flowers and the foliage. So adding some dark in and some sections, and then in a moment I'm going to let that dry again and then I'll work into it again. If you don't like a section you've done, you can also add a little water, dab it out with your tissue and just go over the top, or just create it into something else. I think here, because we've got some nice bright colours, we've got the yellow, we've got the crimsony pink and the violet, and then the nice greens around, it just gives a nice harmonious effect to begin with. And we're just trying to get those shapes in there. And then I'll put the vase in a moment, the start of the vase anyway. Some little dots in there just to give some added details. Need to mix some more red in a moment. So I'm just adding a bit of depth of colour there, just a bit of darkness, and then sometimes when I feel I'm getting a little bit controlled, I like to just sort of start to wisp the paint about a little again. Just really have fun, just see where it takes you. So I've let this dry a little more, and then I've just gone in and added a little more yellow into those flowers at the front. Sorry, the video stopped recording then. And then just because I feel that yellow needs to be reflected in other parts of the painting, I put a little yellow rose at the top right there, and then some other splashes of yellow into the painting. So even though I'm using the picture as a guide, I'm still having a bit of freedom and painting where I want things to go and those sorts of things. So here, adding in a bit of vase and then the shadow at the bottom. Don't be precise, just as I do there, just flick the paintbrush back and two. And now, I love my splashes, so I'm just going to add some splash details with a bit of the yellow, just to get some of that extra yellow through, and then I'll do it with an orangey colour as well, just to bring a little bit of edge to that and to contrast with the green. Just straighten up the vase there, it wasn't quite straight. Doesn't have to be perfectly straight anyway. I'm going to add some ink at the end of this as well, because I always like to ink my paintings, my watercolour paintings. I can't help but have a little doodle at the end. So now I'm getting that violet in there and just adding a few more dots in. Just change the colour up just a little, add a little more definition to some areas. Notice there I've got two pots of water, one for cleaning the brush out and then one for really cleaning the brush out. If you're dipping in, say you've been in a dark colour, wash the brush out in the first and then wash the brush out in the next pot, the furthest one away there, and then you can go back into the yellow and you're not creating a smudgy yellow. Adding a little bit more darkness in there with my fine brush, just a fine round brush. I'm not really thinking too much about where I'm putting it, but just flowing it around. Adding a little orange into those. perhaps a little bit too much, so blend it out a little. And so I'm quite happy with that. I've let it dry completely fully, and now I'm going to go in with my marker pen and just add the details. This is a thick Sharpie that I'm just going to add some details around the larger flowers and add some stems in, and then I'll go in with the fine line and add some more details. You could always do this with a fine paintbrush and one of your darker colours. You could make a really dark violet kind of colour and go in with that. That's always beautiful as well when you do it with a paintbrush. It's just I quite like that kind of illustrative style, so I tend to go in with my pen and add those details in. But of course you can leave it alone without doing the pen details. I could just add the odd little one like this, a little bit of shadow in for there, just to define the vase like that. Now I'm just going to go in and have a nice doodle with my fine line. I'm really quite pleased with how this is turning out. As I say, I've not painted flowers for really quite a while, so it's lovely to get back to it. And I know a lot of you do love to paint flowers, so I thought it was about time that I would show you some of mine. If you've got any ideas or anything you'd like me to show you, then please do comment in the comments section below. I'd always love to know what you think. I love to doodle, so I do love this stage where you just get to add some details in there. I know some of you might be a bit more of a purist in watercolour and wouldn't agree with adding ink in at the end, but it's really my style, and so that's what I like to do. I find it really fun, so why not? And you just experiment and see what you like to create and how you like to create it, and see what you come up with. I'm sure you come up with something really quite beautiful, and just keep practicing, really practice. Try some different compositions, different colours, and just see how you get on. So it's all about mark making, just making some marks on the page and letting the eye and the viewer just recreate what they think is happening in your picture. Everybody might see it slightly differently, and as I say, as long as you're enjoying the creative process, then never mind what anybody else's see. If you like it, you're happy making it, then absolutely wonderful. I love all different kinds of arts and crafts, and painting is just one of those things that I love. So see there, I've added a couple of like little yellow roses in the background and just bring them back to life by just adding some detail to make us see that yes, I meant for them to be some roses. Just adding in the final details there, and then I'm going to go in with some paint splashes because I do love a good paint splash. But first, because maybe I didn't leave quite enough white space in some of the areas, I'm just going to go in and add a little bit of quite thick white watercolour. Another thing that quite a lot of artists might not do is go back in and add white afterwards, but I say why not? The white's there, you can use it. And add some splashes in there. So if you just flick quite hard down and the paint will splash off. So I've got a slight pinky tone going on in there. It just adds a little detail. So now I'm going to add just a little orange, and I'm going to add some of these as flicked little bits of colour, and it's as if, you know, the petals are there, the petals are kind of floating about a bit. I just feel those kind of like bring it to life a bit more. I love a bit of splash paint, as I say. It takes me back to my art college days where we were very expressive. I used to paint with an absolutely massive brush and on like 2 metre canvases. I used to paint loads, and so there we go. I'm really quite pleased with this. I love all the mark making going on in there, as you can see. Love all the marks, the splashes of colour, and I think it's come together to be quite a beautiful piece that I'm quite happy with, and I hope you do give it a go. I really do. If you like it, please come back for some more and please subscribe.